Hello, and welcome to the 9th in this series of short films on foundational concepts in economics. In this one, we're going to look at the idea of the entrepreneur, which is a key concept in economics, employed by economists from across the methodological and ideological spectrum. Now, the popular conception of what an entrepreneur is very easy and straightforward. An entrepreneur means a businessman, a figure in business who starts up a new business from scratch typically, maybe makes an invention or some kind of important innovation in production, and runs a large and successful firm as a result. So we think of people like John D. Rockefeller, Andrew Carnegie, Henry Ford, maybe in the modern world, people like Steve Jobs or Bill Gates. Now in economics, it does indeed mean that, but it also has two much wider ways of thinking about what an entrepreneur is and what entrepreneurs do. And both of these are very important to understand. The first way of thinking about entrepreneurship in economics is the Schumpeterian perspective on the entrepreneur. This is the way of thinking about entrepreneurs and what they do that was first formulated by the Austrian economist Joseph Schumpeter. Schumpeter created this idea in the period between World War I and World War II, and it's probably his most important legacy in economics, although he's one of the great economists for a number of reasons. For Schumpeter, the entrepreneur is a profit-seeking or end-directed innovator. The key thing about the entrepreneur in Schumpeter's worldview is that he does something that is new, that people haven't done before, or he makes significant changes to the way things have been done heretofore. Now, it's a wider category than the first, because it doesn't just mean for Schumpeter the owner of a business. It may be the manager. It may be an individual, a self-employed person. It may be the government. The government and the state can act as an entrepreneur in many cases, and often has done. It may even be a non-governmental organization, a charity or a non-government organization such as a pressure group. These can also be Schumpeterian entrepreneurs, even though they're not strictly guided by profit, which is the usual motive for an entrepreneur. Now, why does this matter? Well, what it matters for is this reason. In Schumpeter's way of thinking, entrepreneurs are the source of innovation by definition. They are the special subcategory of economic actors who do things that are truly novel, that change the way we live, that change the way we interact with each other in economic matters. Now that matters because innovation is the source of economic growth. As we'll see in a subsequent program, economic growth, properly understood, has to involve innovation, and it's entrepreneurs who do this. So without entrepreneurs, or with fewer of them, you will have less or no true economic growth. Now, entrepreneurs bring about their work through what Schumpeter, in a famous expression, called the gale of creative destruction. What he means by this is that the activity of the entrepreneur has both a positive and a negative aspect. They introduce new ways of doing things, the creative side, which brings about new products, new services, and to the extent that they raise productivity, higher living standards. But they also typically destroy the older way of doing things. They make old industries and old ways of making a living go out of existence. So Henry Ford and the other entrepreneurs like Gottlieb Daimler, who created the modern motor car industry, not only created new products and lots of new jobs, they also swept away all of the jobs and the huge industry that was associated with the horse, which went from being the main mode of transportation and motive power to being simply a luxury good. So entrepreneurs both create and destroy. They are the dynamic element in modern economy. It's worth saying and stressing something at this point, which is that for an economist, an innovation is not the same thing as an invention. An innovation, in the Schumpeterian sense, the things that entrepreneurs do, means anything that makes a resource more productive than it was before, or which turns something from being something useless with no economic use to something that does have a use or potential use. That makes something from being just a part of the natural world into its being a resource. An example in this case would be oil. For most of human history, oil, naphtha, as the Greeks and Romans called it, was just stuff that bubbled out of the ground in certain places, and it was actually not a resource at all, but a nuisance, because it meant that land couldn't be used for farming. But the entrepreneurs who invented things like the internal combustion engine and the oil lamp turned it from being simply a natural phenomenon into a resource. Subsequent entrepreneurs, like Henry Ford, increased the value of that resource. And so that is what innovations are. They're not simply inventions. Some inventions are not innovations, in other words. Now, the second way of thinking about entrepreneurs is the one that's associated particularly with the American economist Israel Kirzner. Now, in his view, entrepreneurship and the activity of entrepreneurs has to do with the price mechanism and how it works. He is an Austrian economist, broadly speaking. He belongs to the Austrian school, and so his thinking about the price mechanism follows the kind of lines laid out by Friedrich Hayek, in which essentially prices convey information to consumers and producers. Now, in a pure neoclassical view, the price mechanism is frictionless and transparent. It has to rest upon certain presumptions, such as perfect information and no economic actor, producer or consumer, being able to influence the price generated by exchange to any degree whatever. If these things don't apply, then in the neoclassical view, you have a market failure. Now, for Kirzner and Hayek, this is not the case. People do not have perfect information because of the knowledge problem. And what this means is that the market for Kirzner is always imperfect. It is never the perfect market, the perfect equilibrium market of the neoclassical model. Instead, there's always glitches. There are always misallocations of resources, goods that are not correctly priced. Now, entrepreneurs for Israel Kirzner are people, not necessarily businessmen or managers. They can be anybody, consumers or whatever, who have a particular quality that he calls alertness. What they have is an awareness of instances or cases that they are aware of where a good is not correctly priced, where it's maybe could attract a higher price if it was moved to a different place, or where it could be given a use that other people have not yet recognized. And the entrepreneurs are the people who, because of their alertness, take advantage of this mispricing to gain entrepreneurial or windfall profits, supernormal profits. Now, what that means is that for Kirzner and those who follow him, the entrepreneurs are the people who make the price system work. Because by responding to the imperfections in the real world price system brought about by the knowledge problem, they actually correct those imperfections and they bring about a more optimal or more better allocation of resources than the one that otherwise would exist. And they also may bring about, in fact, an equilibrium like the one that is supposed to rise automatically in the neoclassical model. However, it's worth saying that for Kirzner and others of his mind, this equilibrium is always temporary. It's a bit like a balanced bicycle. It only exists so long as the bicycle keeps on moving forward. So in this way of thinking about entrepreneurship, entrepreneurship is an activity that anybody at almost any place can engage in. And it's the activity of trying to respond to the incentives that the actual prices goods create in such a way as to gain something from it through arbitrage, if you like, and by that activity to actually bring supply and demand into better alignment and to correct the imperfections of the price system. So for Israel Kirzner and the economists who follow him, which is many people, certainly in the Austrian school, but indeed many others, entrepreneurship is a vital economic activity. It's the activity that actually makes the economy function and makes the price system work. So for both of these reasons, entrepreneurs are key figures in the economy. You do need to be aware of whether or not the book you're reading is using the term in either the Schumpeterian or the Kersnerian sense. But in either sense, entrepreneurs are vitally important people.